Hey, restorers, welcome to a special episode of the Restoration Today podcast. We're continuing to do kind of wildfire coverage and talking to as many people as we can to kind of get stories of what's happening in California and bring in some insights of what to maybe expect in the days, weeks, months, maybe years to come, how other restorers can help. I know that a lot of restorers have reached out to me like, hey, how can have you heard of any nonprofits? Have you heard of any way to help? And I think everybody does just want to help at this point. So ATI is one of the companies that is in the thick of it. They are based in Anaheim and have, lots of locations. But I'm excited to have Kyle Bias here with me this morning. He is the regional VP of the West for ATI. And I've been kind of chatting a little bit with Jeff Moore on and off about what's going on and seeing some pictures and all of that. So I'm excited to have Kyle here to share what they are seeing. And I know that they're already tackling some projects while the rest of the wildfire areas that were heavily impacted are still closed because there's just a lot to be done. So Kyle, thank you so much for being here. I am going to toss it over to you first to just kind of introduce yourself.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me. Good morning. Kyle Bias, I'm the Regional Vice President of the West for ATI. Going into I believe it's 22nd year in the
Nice.
restoration business. I've spent most of my career in the environmental space,
Okay.
asbestos-led demolition, working most of the wildfires for the past 10 to 15 years in California, up and down the state. So this is an interesting one. I know we'll get into that a little later, but again, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to touch on that a little bit. So your background is in environmental. So how well does that play into events like this? I mean, that is different than coming from maybe the reconstruction side or somebody that's more, yeah, there's a lot of testing and things to be done. So how does that play well into kind of managing and running teams and all of that when you understand the environmental side?
It really comes into play for safety when it comes
Yeah.
to our teams. You get a lot of folks again. This is a cat event. Most
Mhm.
people look at cat events when with water. We talk about hurricanes and things on the East Coast. Well, it's really important for our teams, not only for ATI, for any restorer, to know what type of materials you're working in and around in. PPE is at top of mind when we're talking to any of our teams, any fellow restorers, and residents. So
Mhm.
having the environmental background to understand what regulations the city, the county, and the state are putting in place to keep people safe has really been helpful to the community because a lot of them are confused. Doing a lot of outreach and having those conversations with entire neighborhoods on how to keep themselves safe as they're going back. Their home is a total loss and they have access, trying to go find heirlooms to know, hey, what type of PPE should I be wearing? So just having the ability to educate people, that environmental background has gone a long way right now.
Yeah, awesome. So you also mentioned that you've worked in a lot of wildfires in recent years. So how does this one compare or just not even compare at all to other wildfire events that you've been in?
For California, we see wildfires spark all the time,
Yeah.
and truthfully, I think we've become numb to them because they pop up so often. This devastation that we're seeing, I've never seen before. We've had Paradise before. We've had the Thomas Fire, the Woolsey Fire. One thing to keep in mind for the restorers and people back east and on California is we have two massive fires 48 miles apart. And for anybody that comes to California, 48 miles doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be half your day
Yeah.
at the wrong time. So you have two epic events very close to each other in proximity as opposed to generally you have a fire in the top of the state and the bottom of the state.
Hmm.
And I had a conversation yesterday with somebody that says it's not a wildfire, it's an urban fire because the fire encroached so much into these cities. Um,
Yeah.
Destroyed schools, destroyed grocery stores. So it was an interesting term,
Yeah.
urban fire, but this is definitely a fire that will change the landscape of both Altadena, California, and Pacific Palisades, California, forever.
Yes. Yes. 100%. So what have the last few weeks looked like for you and your team, and what do you kind of expect moving forward?
The last couple of weeks have been interesting. For us as restorers, for us for disaster recovery at ATI. You mentioned we're headquartered in Anaheim. That's our largest office.
Yeah.
Our most resources at the early stages of the fire. You could get some access into the zones. So we went from small access into the zones to access for us personally doing our community outreach, bringing water to the firemen, bringing masks to the firemen, to a complete lockdown of the zones. If you were not a first responder, if you were not a part of the utilities, you were not getting in. That includes residents. Now we've moved into the preparation stage. There's certain areas that have opened up. The outer line neighborhoods are starting to get power back. And as you
Okay.
see that, you're starting to see an influx of calls, a lot of questions. Our teams, both in our local offices, Simi Valley, Anaheim, and our LAX office, are receiving calls and a lot of questions. And one thing that we're telling our teams and reminding our teams is we are, as restorers, need to remember empathy as we're talking to these homeowners because they've lost everything.
Yeah.
We cannot forget, we're the experts. We see this often. This is the first and hopefully last time they ever have to deal with it. So, giving the information and having empathy towards these victims is top of mind for our teams.
Yeah, that's good advice. It's easy for us to remember, but I know, prior to being in restoration, if something had happened to my home, I wouldn't know that the contents could be restored. I wouldn't know what could be cleaned and what couldn't be cleaned and what's safe and what's not. I don't think any of us would really have any idea. The restoration industry kind of is a secret in a way, a best kept secret, because you don't know that
Absolutely.
it exists until you need it, and then it's everything that you ever needed. But
Right.
yeah. Okay, so what advice, you kind of talked a little bit about this a little bit ago, but what advice do you have for other restorers who are trying to figure out how they can help in this situation? I think, I was thinking about how hurricanes, they pass through, and in 48 hours the industry is kind of ready to go, starting to move into the area and ready to go. But this is really different from a hurricane and most cat events that other restorers are used to responding to. So what advice would you give to other restorers who are kind of watching and trying to figure out how or if they can help?
Like you said, restorers, the restoration community. It's, again, if you don't know about it, it kind of doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
We're a tight knit group. People know people from all over the place. I will say, if you were not in California and you're looking to come into California to help support these efforts, please do your research. Um, Look at the California, what's required with the California work authorization. Look at the LA County websites on what's required from a contractor. I will say that we continue to hear on every briefing, the Department of Insurance is looking at contractors under a microscope during this event. So it's not to say don't come and be afraid to come, but do your research. There's information online at County of Los Angeles for this, the Department of Insurance website as well. But do your research if you're planning to come into California to both either Altadena or Pacific Palisades to do work, because we want you to come, do great work, and be able to get paid and go back and not get into any jeopardy because you don't have the right licenses, you don't have the right information on a work authorization. So that would be my biggest advice is do your homework. Again, reach out to ATI. Again, RIA is a great resource for you to go
Yes.
get that information as well.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so share a little bit about what your teams have been up to. I know that there are areas that are still closed off, but there are other surrounding areas with major smoke damage or whatever that may be, odor issues. So what has your team been up to in the last few weeks?
Our team has really been focused on two things. Community outreach has been one, and again, people have lost homes. Anything that we can do as ATI, part of ATI cares. It's what we're built on. So we've been out in the community doing what we can, helping with food drives, dropping off water. But from a restoration perspective, our focus has really been on getting kids back into schools. Um, a lot of the a lot of the schools in Pasadena were affected by the Altadena fire, which is directly south. Pasadena is directly south of Altadena. So um, we have schools in those areas. We have schools in the Palisades where we're just working and supporting the districts, trying to get kids back into school, get them some level of normal. We have some neighborhoods, unfortunately, that when these kids get into school, those are the only two meals they get in a day. So focus on getting those open, getting kids back, so parents can get back to work if they don't have childcare. So just really trying to get the areas that aren't affected back to some level of normal for the people.
What does the community outreach aspect look like? What are some of the things you're doing there? I know you mentioned like talking to neighborhoods and things like that. I know some people might go ahead. You can answer. I won't even
When
keep
it comes to community outreach, our marketing group, led by Brian Pope, they have been aligning with community organizations, both Altadena, both Pacific Palisades. Anything that comes up that ATI can be a part of, whether it is, we're delivering water using our box trucks because we have the ability to move large amounts of water to an event. We're doing that. Anything. We had a team go out to a food drive, food and clothes drives. Just lend a helping hand. Right now is that time. From a restoration standpoint, we talked about hurricanes. The hurricane comes, it goes, and restorers come right in and do what we do. Right now, because of the lockdown and the fact that you really can't get into these major areas, ATI has done a pivot of we're helping the community in any way we can.
find the helpers and help the helpers. Yes.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right, Kyle. Well, anything else before we wrap it up that you want to share?
I'll just say this to the restoration community: when you come out, if you come out, there's a lot of opportunity here. Be safe. Be safe. Be safe.
Yes. Great advice. All right. Well, Kyle, thank you so much. Thank you for everything that ATI is doing and your involvement in the industry. And good luck and prayers to you and your team as you move forward. I know there's a lot of work to be done. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I appreciate it.